Meet John Derkits.
Came from the world of finance before taking a strange turn into e-commerce.
Amazon growth specialist,
We're a full funnel, full service Amazon management agency.
investor,
My agency, Color More Lines, is a function of M&A. It's a function of a merger.
and an expert in building brands.
Brands don't have a traffic problem. They either have a click-through problem or conversion problem.
Join us as we explore how brands are currently scaling on Amazon,
Costs per clicks on Amazon are continuously going up. If you're a brand that can't afford, you need to look to acquire customers elsewhere.
how he's built a system generating multiple millions of dollars in annual revenue,
Essentially, you don't scale bad systems. If you're digging a grave, don't dig that grave faster.
and the tools you need to succeed online.
The reality is, to succeed on Amazon in 2025 and beyond, you need
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Hey John, thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, Jordan, great to be here. I feel like this is many, many months in the making.
Yes, it is, but I'm glad we finally got you nailed down after your events, and I've got you on the hot seat today.
Yeah, it seems we're both world travelers. We were just talking, you've been at multiple events over the past month. I have too. I think I've worked more weekends over the past 28, 30 days than I have in the entirety of my 20-year career.
Wow. So it's
Yeah.
a busy schedule then.
Busy, eventful, but I've been able to visit some beautiful places, meet some great people in person. It really makes you appreciate just face-to-face, hand-to-hand contact with folks that you've gotten to know over a period of years.
Do you think that's more important in kind of today's digital age, that we do make time for those kind of interactions?
I think it's a competitive differentiator at the very least. It's funny. Maybe the gray in my beard gives it away, but I'm a blue-bred millennial, and I've been around before COVID, been around in the era before Zoom calls and video conferencing, text messaging, all that fun stuff. But I read something interesting months back, and it was about how Gen Z is struggling as they enter the workforce. And one thing that they're struggling with in particular is in-person interviews. And it's maybe hard for some of us who are a little more seasoned in our careers to appreciate, but this generation has grown up in an era of ubiquitous cell phones, text messaging, video calls, and to sit across the table from someone 3 feet away, make eye contact with them, read their emotions, read their nonverbal cues. It's a real skill. And the reality is, if you don't practice it, you're not going to develop that skill. That muscle is not going to grow in you ever. And if I have any advantage over Gen Zers, because I'll say their technical aptitude is probably far in excess of mine, but I know how to sit across the table from someone and connect with them. And that's really what I get from a lot of these in-person events, whether I'm speaking or attending. It's sitting across the table with the likes of you and others and just making that connection. What you find when you do that is a lot of downstream interactions get made easier. You can misspeak, you can not say some things, but the benefit of that relationship kind of closes the gap. So that's what I'm really loving about in-person events, as chaotic as they make my life, as draining as they are. I'm sitting here drinking lemon water right now because I have a little bit of a raspy throat from either speaking or breathing airplane air, whatever it is. So trade-offs with everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned before, like, are you guys at the agency, are you in office or are you hybrid or remote? What does the setup look like?
So we are fully remote. We're a global team. I think we have folks in 12, maybe 15 countries. But having said that, we have a core group in Southern California, in Los Angeles. And as talent permits, and I'm sure we'll talk about building an agency and some of the things that distinguish good agencies from great agencies or great agencies from bad agencies. We're trying to hire people in that area so that even if we are not in office or hybrid, co-location is possible. And folks can get together in coffee shops or attend shows together or just informally work together in whatever setting. I think there's a ton of value in that for learning, for teamwork. And frankly, I'm in Chicago. I'm looking at folks that can join me here in Chicago so we can have a little satellite office. Where we're evolving in our thinking around how we set up the team is co-location where possible, but not as a prerequisite for employment with us.
Okay. Because I want to kind of go back to your first point then. So, obviously there's a number of benefits to remote work. As a kind of employer, you can pick from a kind of wider pool of talent and, a host of other benefits as well. But I think one of the other issues is, especially with junior staff, it's harder to train. How have you found kind of employee development and kind of that side of things in the remote business?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. We're an agency of about 45 people now, and I think ensuring that we have strong people and that they develop in line with our expectations and they really become superstars in their subject area. There's sort of two dynamics that we believe that we need to develop. One is sort of just top down. As we bring people in, we make it very clear that there is a standard, there is a bar, and we try to hire for people that can not just clear that bar but raise that bar. And that's sort of a relic of my time at Amazon. There's this concept of bar raisers. So we're hiring to a standard at minimum, but then on the other side, there's sort of a bottoms up dynamic that we try to engender, and that is we're seeking out people that we call curious achievers. These are people who, if you've ever heard of the Clifton Strengths, it's a great book. I did it when I was at Amazon. You read it and you kind of take a quiz and you have your 5 Clifton Strengths. Achiever is one of those strengths, and curiosity is one of those as well. So we've kind of merged those together, and we've merged them together simply because we've looked at our team. We've looked at the load bearing members of our team, the true A players, and those are the characteristics that they seem to have: curious achievers. And so, when we think about developing people and making sure that they stay ahead of the curve, they can continue to meet our standard, it starts with hiring and bringing on curious achievers. And then from the top down, it's making sure that everyone meets that standard. But what we find is between those three characteristics, standards, curiosity, and achievement, you create virtuous cycles that sort of interact and amplify one another. When you sit in an organization where you see high standards, and that's not just standards in output, but standards in work ethic or standards in educating oneself, that sort of reflects onto you, or at minimum pulls you in the direction along with those people. Same thing with curiosity and achievement. You have invariably worked in organizations, Jordan, where you have very curious people who are pushing the envelope. Oftentimes, at least for me, that has pulled me in that direction. And same thing with achievement. So that's a long way of answering your simple question about development and making sure people stay educated. I think it's gone are the days where a company from the top down pushes out learning modules, have, you know, CPEs. That was something that existed in my former career. And I know you come from finance and banking. So the concept of CPEs or CLEs, continuing learning education, continuing professional education. I worked in places where they pushed down these trainings and you had to just rotely sit through them to get credits to continue on in your path. I think those days are gone. I think that's a bad way of learning and helping people along in their professional development. We instead like to create sort of a set of virtuous cycles and a culture in which learning is not just celebrated, but encouraged.
Okay. And it sounds like most of the emphasis, correct me if I'm wrong, is placed on the hiring and the vetting to make sure that people
Yeah.
have certain characteristics in them.
Yeah. I mean, we're both marketers, right? So let's talk about funnels. And, it does start top of funnel with kind of a rigorous selection and screening mechanism. Actually, I'd even go even further up, and it's where you're pulling people in from, because there are the standard places, job boards like Indeed or Upwork or LinkedIn. But what's interesting, and I think I have a social media post on this scheduled, going back to our true A players at my agency, the people that are foundational talent, load bearing walls, they have come from three sources. Source number one is my Best at Amazon newsletter. These are people that were literally newsletter readers of mine and reached out and said, "Hey, John, would love to work together, would love to learn about your agency." And it became very clear to me in the early parts of those conversations that this is someone I want to hire. And then they went and passed through our interview process. So that's one source of talent that I never expected, but has sort of fallen on my lap. Second source of talent that we seem to be on the benefiting end of is acquisitions or acquihires. So my agency, Color More Lines, is a function of M&A. It's a function of a merger. A lot of our top talent these days came from the merging entities. And I think that's one of the, I don't know if we'll talk about agency M&A at any point over this next hour, but that's one of the magical aspects, the intangible aspects of M&A. You pursue M&A on its face to impact your P&L, to make step changes in your growth arc. But along the way, you get some assets, whether it's customer relationships or team members that can be really valuable and can truly 10x your trajectory. And then the third source of talent for us has been referrals and word of mouth. And it's not something that you can rely on. But I look back at those three sources of talent, my newsletter, acquihires, and word of mouth. It's hard to build systems around those. But nevertheless, my experience is that we find the best kind of bar raising A players in those sources.
For sure. And I think that saying is like, do things that don't scale, right? And
That's right.
keep hearing that, and I keep seeing it in practice as well.
It's so difficult though, too, especially when you've been in organizations where you become hardwired to scale things. I'm guilty of this as well. I think my time at Amazon really flipped that switch in a hard way to get me thinking about how processes scale before pushing too far down that path. But what has helped me over the years and what has been a sort of tempering influence on that how will it scale question that lingers in the back of my head is it's actually a SpaceX design principle. And Elon Musk did a classic interview, I think on one of his space pads with a journalist a couple of years back talking through the SpaceX design principles. But one of the design principles he talked about was essentially you don't scale bad systems. If you're digging a grave, dig that grave faster. And so that's been again a tempering influence on that thought around how will this scale, and has also given me the space to do things that don't scale. Because whether it's talent or M&A lead gen or just sales lead gen for the agency, we find that our best partners, our best customers, our best people often come from these sources that don't scale. But that doesn't mean you should categorically reject.
For sure. So you mentioned it there, you used to work at Amazon. I know you've had a pretty varied career, if I remember from your LinkedIn. So you've been, a teacher, you've worked at KPMG, Amazon. Can you just kind of take us back to the start and run through at a super high level what your prior
Yeah,
experience is and kind of where you are today and what you're looking to do in the future? Because
yeah.
I know you mentioned kind of some M&A stuff in there as well.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the 2 minute version, and I know people often fast forward through this, so I'll do my best to make it quick. But like you, I came from the world of finance, and I spent a decade in the finance space before taking a strange turn into e-commerce. Got recruited by Amazon, joined Amazon as head of the third-party marketplace for the consumer electronics vertical, and wonderful role, had nothing to do with what I had been doing in my past life, in my first career. Also was a fish out of water, was not something that I stepped into having any clue what the third party marketplace on Amazon was or what FBA on Amazon was. But it was a role that on its face offered a lot of transferable skills that I was seeking to obtain at that point in my career. P&L management, strategic thinking, executive skills, team building. There were a lot of things that I wasn't getting in the first decade of my career that this role seemed to promise. And so what that meant was my journey into e-commerce, into Amazon, started in the belly of the beast. I think a lot of people start as sellers, as brand owners, and I love that arc. It just wasn't the arc that I took. But I spent 3 years seeing how things on the Amazon marketplace worked or didn't work. And among other things, that inspired in me just a deep feeling of entrepreneurship, a deep desire to be an entrepreneur. And so I left Amazon in 2019 and did a couple things. Number one is I stuck to what I knew, which was the Amazon marketplace, specifically consulting for brands on the Amazon marketplace, and started really a solo shop for high level executive and strategy coaching for brands on Amazon. Second thing I did was started an Amazon brand. And, I think I felt my unique level of insight into the marketplace and how brands either succeeded or didn't succeed on the marketplace would give me a competitive advantage. And in the beginning, it didn't, but over time, it did. And I joke with people that I had to get punched in the face a lot by the competitive realities on Amazon before I realized that everything I thought I knew was not true, or either if it wasn't untrue, it was not valuable. So started a brand, really kind of developed my chops for selling on Amazon, and that led me to kind of this current path that I'm on today, where I'm a brand owner. I put out a lot of content related to selling on Amazon and succeeding on Amazon, and then I'm an agency owner, and I think there's an undercurrent across all of that, which is M&A. And we touched on that a little bit before, but to be specific, in addition to starting brands, I've acquired brands. In addition to starting agencies, I've acquired agencies. And really where I'm spending my time today is looking to grow my agency by M&A, looking to bolt on complementary agencies that in totality allow us as a conglomerate to serve brands really across the digital spectrum wherever their customers are, because brands have customers everywhere, right? They're not just on Amazon, and some of those customers prefer to shop in retail stores. Some prefer to shop on D2C sites. Some prefer to shop on Walmart. Some prefer to shop on TikTok. We want to help brands meet customers wherever they are.
Okay. Can I just ask a cheeky kind of personal question? How do you balance? Because it seems like from kind of when you left Amazon, you've been juggling quite a few balls. How do you balance all your kind of projects?
The answer is I don't. And I think, I was in Prague last week for an event that I was speaking at, and I was running some VIP sessions, and this topic of balance came up a few times. And the answer that I gave around how I spend my time and juggle things is 90% of my time is on my agency, 10% of my time is on my brands, and then 10% of my time is on my content. Anyone can kind of do that math and realize I'm overextended. The truth is I am in many cases. I think the thing that keeps me sane in the short term is there are sort of well, first of all, I'm operating entirely in the Amazon ecosystem. So that's one thing that keeps me sane. But then the other thing is there's cross pollination, right? Good example is my brands are run by my agency. So I can sort of offload some of the cognitive overload, the physical work to my agency, right? At the same time, so much of what I learn from running my brands kind of trickles into our agency operations. And it's well known across my entire team that the brands that they run, my brands that they run, are sandboxes. They have more latitude to experiment, to make mistakes than they otherwise would have with a existing client brand. And really, to complete the flywheel or the ecosystem, my brands, everything I do for them, my agency, what I see in my brands and our client brands, all that stuff informs the content that I put out there in my newsletter and on social media. So there are not enough hours in the day for me, to be sure, but my brain is not wandering across multiple domains and trying to keep track of these things that are truly disparate. I'm thinking about Amazon all the time, and there's sort of compounding that's happening in my head.
Okay, so it's kind of tangential opportunities that stack next to each other.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And I think rounding out the ecosystem, the flywheels, whatever you want to call it, as I put out content that brings more people in that either want to partner on brands or want to, become agency customers. As I work on my brand and, figure things out, again, it feeds back into what we do for our agency clients. So, there's kind of a rote way of calculating where my time is spent and how I'm balancing things. But then there's the more nuanced way, which recognizes the fact that if these were all done by separate people, they would take longer or they would not have as much in them, if that makes sense.
For sure. Can I also ask kind of how you evaluate a new opportunity? So if something comes to you, what kind of lens or mental model do you look at it through in terms of
Yeah.
potentially taking that on as another project?
I will tell you that my framework has changed over the years. It has changed as I've gotten more busy. It has changed as I've become a parent and my work days start and end at certain times. And to put it in very simple terms, this is not my own phrase and I forget where I stole it from, but my filter is truly, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And there's certainly a level of intuition and gut and emotion behind that. But what I've found is that even if an opportunity on paper is super exciting and would be a hell yes on paper alone, if my heart or my gut isn't into it, then it's hard for me to justify. And so, you and I have some mutual friends, some mutual partners, and the stuff that I'm doing with them is really a function of the fact that it's a hell yes in every case. And what's interesting is sometimes those hell yeses have uncertain payoffs. The financial kind of future is uncertain, but I know that I get to work with someone that I would genuinely enjoy spending time with. And for me, that can be a big source of hell yes.
So it's very interesting for completely different reasons and more kind of personal relationship level. I've had that piece of advice given to me probably about 3 times in the past week. So it's interesting that you
Yeah.
also apply it from the business perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I'll try to avoid a philosophical tangent here, but we spend so much time with the people that we work with, that we partner with. And I think it's important to choose your circle and choose it well. And sometimes the choice of your circle is predicated around what you gain professionally, what you gain personally. And I guess I just put a high value on people. It's why I'm in the people business. Agencies are a human capital business, and for me, success looks like, and I'm going to steal something from someone else, but this time I can attribute it. Warren Buffett talked about tap dancing to work every day. He built Berkshire Hathaway as a business that he would be so excited about that he could tap dance to work. And that's very much, that feels like a 1950s model of thinking, tap dancing to work, but same concept applies. Whatever happens, the ups and downs of my agency, the ups and downs of my brands, for me, it's much more fulfilling to be able to endure that with people that, you know, either are right there with you or can help you solve and work through a problem or an opportunity.
Okay. So that actually brings me on to my next question, which is key people. So obviously you've got kind of a lot of projects. We talked kind of off camera about how you're looking to kind of pull out of certain aspects of things and focus on others. How do you kind of identify gaps in your businesses or your projects that require another key person? And then how do you go about kind of finding that person and extracting yourself from that role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from either an agency or brand perspective, one of the best things you can do is time log. And some agencies, they they have time monitoring software, and that helps with kind of looking at time and how it's spent. But as an executive, and I picked this up from someone you might know just this past weekend, the founder of an agency called Clear Ads, George Maressa, wonderful human. But he talked with me at length about how he did sort of a 3 or 4 week exercise to understand in big batches where he was spending his time. And it was truly illuminating, especially in terms of the low value, low impact tasks, right? And I think one useful heuristic, if you're looking for gaps for you as an executive, is, are you spending, or well, what are you doing in that quadrant of low value, low impact? Or maybe it's high effort, low impact. You want to avoid that quadrant as much as possible and hire for that quadrant to fill it out, or don't do those things at all. So I think whether you're an executive or you're running a company, tracking is really useful to understand where time is being spent and then make decisions around, should time be spent there, and if so, do we need to hire someone? Do you need to hire an assistant? Do we need to hire an additional resource in a certain area? So the short answer to your question is, I think time tracking, either consistently or for 3 to 4 week sprints, to understand and really audit your time, is critical to understanding process gaps, understanding people gaps, and also understanding product gaps. We'll probably talk about these 3 Ps again, but ultimately that's what an agency is about: people, process, and product. And if you don't have good analytics around those, it's hard to course correct, right? And it's hard to hire people. It's hard to fill process gaps. It's hard to understand if your product, the service you're putting out there, is really consistent with the level of effort in terms of quality.
That was very useful. Thank you. I want to touch now on, you guys color more lines. So, you're an Amazon agency. Can you just talk to me about, in 2025, what services you guys offer and what is needed for a brand to successfully scale on Amazon?
I'm so glad we're touching on this because there's a few different answers I'll give depending on my audience. And I talked about success strategies on Amazon in 2025 at the event that I was just at in front of an audience of Amazon sellers. I think there's a different but related answer for an audience of brands, omni-channel brands that aren't necessarily Amazon experts, Amazon sellers. They are ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they're in retail first, and they're looking to expand on Amazon, or they might already be there. But uh, to your first question, Color More Lines, we're a full funnel, full service Amazon management agency. We help omni-channel or retail first brands either launch on Amazon or scale their existing Amazon channels. And we do that by bringing the full force of what is effectively an in-house Amazon team, but on an outsourced basis and for a fraction of the cost of staffing up an in-house Amazon team. The reality is, to succeed on Amazon in 2025 and beyond, you need sort of a general manager internally, a captain of the ship. You need a PPC strategist or specialist. You need a supply chain and inventory person. You need a creative or designer, or at least resources from an internal design team. You need an off Amazon marketing expert, someone that can maybe harness the power of an email list and drive it to Amazon. You need customer service. I mean, I just listed off a half dozen sort of functional roles right there. Brands that underinvest at Amazon see it in their growth arcs. And what we offer as an agency is the ability to have just that one FTE manning the Amazon channel, but the full support of an agency for execution and strategy, right? So that's what we do. But let's get to that second question, the meatier question around strategies for success in 2025 and beyond. I think there are three. Well, there are more than three, but if I had to shortlist it to three for purposes of this conversation today, I'd say first and foremost, it's mastering first party data. And I think one of the cool things about Amazon over the past 5 to 6 years is that they've really opened up the kimono on how much data they give brands. So incidentally, when I left Amazon in 2019, one of the things that I thought gave me a competitive advantage was I saw so much data on my category, particularly around customer demand trends, levers that you could pull for increased click-through rate and conversion. All these things I was seeing, I had kind of mentally cataloged and mapped into the brand that I was starting. And the irony is, a couple years later, Amazon basically launched all that information. They gave that information to brands in the form of a suite of data called Brand Analytics in Seller Central. And this Brand Analytics suite of data, number one, it's first party data, right? It's directly from Amazon. It has been enriched consistently over the years. You can now map the customer journey on Amazon at the keyword level. You can better understand your customers' repeat purchase behavior, their market baskets. There's so much that you can do with this first party data. And I can maybe give a couple examples in a little bit, but it's truly powerful. And for brands that are data driven, which in my mind should be you if you seek to succeed on Amazon, the first party brand analytics data is super powerful. Now, I wouldn't suggest that anyone ignore that, but what's super exciting over the past year is another sort of suite of first party data that Amazon released, and that's AMC, Amazon Marketing Cloud. And with Amazon Marketing Cloud, brands now have deeper visibility into their audiences than they have ever had before. And you're more of you're an email marketer, right? But I would also put you in the category of a true marketer. I think Amazon marketers necessarily grow up in a world of performance advertising where they're just kind of looking at numbers and metrics around bids, placements, targets, right? And they're making small tweaks in their budgets or bids. I think marketers that are are true performance marketers like yourself, they think about marketing in terms of audiences, right? I'm sure when you run email campaigns, you're thinking about cohorts and who you're putting different campaigns in front of. The beauty of AMC is that this really reflects the direction that Amazon is going in terms of advertising. It's empowering brands with the ability to target specific audiences. And I think AMC can be quite sophisticated. It can be quite overwhelming at this stage. Actually, there's a great custom GPT that a good friend of mine created to help people kind of self-educate on AMC. Maybe we can put it in the show notes for folks that want to go down that path or that rabbit hole themselves. But to round this out, first party data, to succeed on Amazon, I think brands have to master it, whether it's brand analytics or AMC, going to be super powerful and frankly, I think predictive of success going forward. So before I maybe dive into the other two strategies, any reactions or follow-up questions on just the concept of mastering first party data that you think your listeners might want to hear about?
No, I think we can dive into it later. But I think this is an approach I feel like not many people on Amazon are taking.
Yeah, no,
A
I
lot of them are
think
focused on other things, and this is top of your,
yeah,
which I think is rare.
it really is. Brand analytics, like I said, I want to say around 2020, 2021 and 2022 was when it was released. And a lot of smart people dove in and sort of analyzed everything that Amazon gave us and provided true prescriptive actions that brands or sellers can take based on what the data was saying, right? Simple things like, if for a given keyword you're getting more impression share than conversion share, you have a conversion problem. So look to your price, look to your main image, look to your title, look to your detail page content. If alternatively your funnel's inverted and you're getting great click-through share, conversion share, but you're not getting enough top of funnel visibility, look at your SEO, look at your PPC, right? All that stuff came out. I think where brands still struggle is they haven't operationalized that. There's data that exists, but they haven't taken that data and turned it into SOPs or otherwise prescriptive actions that their teams can take when they diagnose an issue from the data and they seek to correct it or amplify it, right? So yeah, first party data, that's something I will continue to beat the drum on, and I'm sure I'll probably write about it more on social media and in my newsletter. Second success strategy is somewhat related, and it definitely falls a little bit into your world of email marketing, and that's mastering off Amazon traffic. So a big part of what I talked about at the event that I was at last week in Prague was external traffic strategies for Amazon. And I think the data shows the sad reality that many sellers and brands live in, which is cost per clicks on Amazon are continuously going up. And I don't see a world in which they go down. I mean, there can be temporary drops based on seasonality or based on introduction of new ad products and ad placements, but the directional arc is clear. And so, if you're a brand that can't afford the customer acquisition costs implied by those CPCs, you need to look to acquire customers elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of different options in terms of moving beyond PPC. I would say if you're an omni-channel brand and your budget allows for it, Amazon DSP, their demand side platform, is a great place to start. And you can start lower funnel with retargeting and sort of get a proof of concept, get some higher ROI sales. But what I often counsel brands is to move beyond retargeting into more mid-funnel, upper funnel audiences within DSP, whether they're lifestyle audiences, in-market audiences, lookalikes. There's a long list of audiences to target through DSP, but that's a great way to get off Amazon and start to either generate demand or capture demand that exists but just isn't currently shopping on Amazon. If, however, you might not have a budget for DSP, and DSP isn't cheap, it's more accessible than it used to be, but if a brand or a seller approaches me and says they want to start DSP and they don't have a budget of at least $10,000 a month, I often ask the question, well, have you tapped out your Amazon PPC? Do you think that there's still meat on the bone there? And if there isn't, well, have you looked at Google to Amazon traffic or Meta to Amazon traffic? And that's really the other external traffic strategy or set of tactics that I kind of push brands in the direction of if they don't want to go down the path of DSP or don't have the budget for it.
And is that
Google
paid on those channels?
It's paid, yeah. So Google search ads to Amazon, I think you can get at least a proof of concept or proof points that it'll work for your brand through spending $1,000, $1,500 a month just generating Google search ads and sending them to your Amazon PDPs. Meta, you probably want to spend a little bit more. And at my agency, we're starting to do this more and more. And we've come up with some clever ways to get around the issues with attribution and reporting on Amazon. But nevertheless, great way to test the waters on off Amazon traffic. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with this and how I want to sort of rewire brands is to think in terms of going where their customers are, right? And not where they want them to be. A lot of brands and sellers get into this sort of mental box of just living inside of Amazon's walled garden, wanting all of their customers to be in Amazon. The reality is that you and me and every other shopper has their own proclivities, their own behaviors, and has their own product discovery process and shopping journeys, depending on what the product is, depending on the time of day, depending on the time of year. So you want to meet your customers where they are. And that's really what DSP or Amazon OTT or Google ads, Meta ads allow a brand to do. So, strategy number 2 to kind of bring this full circle is driving off Amazon traffic, either into your Amazon store and channel, or just driving off Amazon traffic to your Shopify, your D2C store, and knowing that there can and will be a halo effect of shoppers that spill over into Amazon. So rounding it out, strategy number 3, and I think this is just as true for 2025 and beyond as it was for the past couple of years, and that's really minding your cash flow. This is something else that I talked about at the event that I was just at, and I even sat on a panel. But it's harder than ever to succeed in retail, to succeed in e-commerce. E-commerce businesses are cash intensive, and the biggest cash outflow is inventory, right? You can't sell what you don't have. And I see so many brands, I see so many sellers and solopreneurs fall into trouble because they don't have the capital to support their growth, or they've taken out debt to support their growth, or they just don't understand the basic mechanics of cash conversion cycles and improving it over time. It can be such an unlock for future growth to take your cash conversion cycle down from 150 days to 100 days, or from 100 days to 50 days. And you need to understand that before you act upon it. And then once you understand it, there's a long list of things that you can do to gradually improve that. But for your listeners that haven't heard the term cash conversion cycle before, the basic concept of it is how quickly do you turn your assets, your inventory, into cash? There's the old saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. You can have a great net profit margin, but if that profit goes right back into buying products, you're cash poor, right? Your bank account isn't changing materially. And I think a lot of people are doing this because they want to see their bank account change materially. So minding your cash flow is a big thing that I preach. Incidentally, it's probably one of the topics that gets the least love on social media or in my newsletter, but I'm going to continue to do so because finance is my love language. Jordan, we probably share that. And it's such a predictor of success or failure or even happiness in owning a brand.
For sure. So I was ironically at a mastermind last weekend, and Ron from Obvi, which is a collagen supplement brand, he gave a speech, and around half of it was on kind of tricks they were doing for their kind of cash flow and to improve their financial position. And yeah, there was a lot of people that were kind of playing on their phone, shall we say, in that part of the speech. But yeah, I thought it was really good and is neglected by a lot of businesses.
It truly is. And I'll say that in a room full of people, I saw pens and cell phones coming out to snap pictures of my slides when I did turn to the little hacks that I offer to improve cash flow. And again, there's a long list, but there's a lot of low effort, simple things that you can do to squeeze a couple extra dollars out of your business, whether it's changing your bank account to one that actually pays interest on your balance, right? I think a lot of sellers end up with a 0% interest checking account. Well, there's some great alternatives out there that'll pay 4 to 5% interest on that cash sitting there. There's credit cards that will extend your payment cycle. There's different negotiation paths that you can take with sellers to make them your bank, basically. There's ways to increase your credit limit with Amazon for the ads that you pay them for. There's just a long list, and I give these hacks out very freely in my speeches, in my newsletter, because I want people to succeed. I want people to actually have, be able to eat the fruits of their labor from running brands. And I've been in the position where, heck, I mean, one of my smaller businesses right now, it generates basically $0 for me personally. Every dollar goes back into the business, and we're building enterprise value, but it's not an exciting brand for me because I don't have anything to show for it, in a given week, month, or year. There's just not a lot of income. So I want to help brands and sellers avoid that if they can by just being cognizant of kind of the core cash flow concepts.
For sure. It's super important. Can we now look at kind of strategies for brands that are maybe new to the space? The first question I have here is, I was buying a desk the other day on Amazon. It felt like super saturated as a category. And I guess my first question is, are there certain categories or product types that you would tell people to stay away from if they're thinking of launching a new business?
Yeah. It's funny. I think you could develop a contrarian point of view on any category that I give, right? Like, because there was a good example of this is there are a lot of reasons to avoid heavy, bulky products on Amazon. One reason kind of aligns to what we were just talking about, finance and cash flow. These are products where Amazon will take a large chunk of your margin in FBA fees. And so if you're in a category of heavy, bulky products where there's not significant margin for you, you can get in trouble really fast, between, your landed COGS, inclusive of your freight costs, your Amazon PPC, your referral fees, your FBA fees, your product returns, right? That's another cost that people don't think about, but with heavy bulky is quite scary. So, I mean, there's conventional wisdom and a lot of reasons to say avoid heavy bulky. But on the other hand, I've seen a number of sellers, I know a number of sellers who have succeeded with heavy bulky products across categories. And I think in part they've succeeded was because conventional wisdom was to avoid those. And they've been able to look at a category, look at the heavy bulky opportunity, see how unsaturated it was, see or have a unique way to make the unit economics work and succeed, right? So, that's one example, again, where you could kind of make a contrarian argument for any category that I list. But I'll tell you the ones that scare me the most. Anything in apparel is terrifying to me just because of the broad catalog that you have to maintain, right? You're talking about size variants, color variants, style variants. That's on my personal too hard pile, regardless of any supply chain advantages that I might have. It's just not something that I would feel comfortable doing. Having said that, and I'll tell you why I know this, there's this, I'm not going to say great brand out there, but there's this brand out there called Coofandy, Coofandy, China-based brand. And if you look them up on any Amazon tool, you'd be shocked at how much revenue they do. I know of them because I had to go to a wedding down in Colombia earlier this year for one of my team members. And Colombian weddings have a custom where you wear all white. And I don't have many all white clothes. And I also knew that I was gonna be on a beach in 90-degree weather. So I'm kind of shopping on Amazon, and I found that this Coofandy brand had a long list of options for me of all white, kind of light linen stuff to wear. Quality wasn't the greatest, but what do you expect when you're spending $20, $30 for a shirt and pants? Point is, again, it's possible to succeed in apparel. Depending on what your supply chain looks like, depending on your tolerance for thin margins, depending on your ability to accept returns. I think apparel's hard. Electronics, even though that was the category that I worked on Amazon, is on my personal too hard pile as well, just because of the rate of development that is required. Jordan, I told some folks this story over dinner at the event that I was at, but it's crazy what you have to do in electronics to stay ahead. And something as simple as wireless phone cases, for instance. I think everyone has a phone, right? We've seen the rate of development there. If you're in the phone case business, your rate of development has to kind of mimic what Samsung, what Apple, what Huawei are doing. And the hard part of that is these phones get released, they get developed under secretly, and then they get released. So how do you get to market quickly for a phone case, right? Well, a lot of these phone case companies have insiders at major phone manufacturers. And I learned this kind of from being in the biz. And suffice it to say, there is a robust and lucrative black market for insiders at phone production facilities that literally memorize the exact dimensions of phones that are coming out on spec, and they sell the specs to wireless phone case providers. That's not a game that I have any business playing. That's not a game where I have any sort of competitive advantage. And I would argue that no one looking to start or succeed on Amazon should get into those places, those spaces where, there's that old, I think it was another Warren Buffettism around, if you're sitting at a poker table and you can't figure out who the patsy is, then it's you. I think same concept applies for selecting a category on Amazon. If you look at it and it seems obvious to you to enter, then there might not be an angle that you're seeing. You might be the patsy, or it's truly an opportunity. All I can say just to round this out is I know the categories where I would be the patsy, and apparel, electronics, food and grocery, those would be the ones that I personally would avoid.
And my kind of follow-up question to this then is, let's say, you've already got a business and you're, successful and you're launching it on Amazon, but it is maybe in one of these categories or niches that is, slightly more saturated. What do you do to stand out above the noise?
Yeah, I think my recommendation is the same whether you have a brand or you're contemplating starting one, and that is build an audience first. I think the past decade was really product first and then audience. And that's why so many entrepreneurs just gravitated toward Amazon, because they could build a product and the audience was there, right? Those days aren't gone, but they are in the rearview mirror, and they are harder and harder to see. What I think we're evolving to in the broader e-commerce landscape, and you see, I mean, I could list a half dozen examples, as I'm sure you could, ranging from celebrity-led brands like Prime Energy Drink, right? That was Logan Paul, to lesser-known brands. I think there's a ton of value and, frankly, a differential advantage that comes from building an audience and then selling to that audience, whether you're going to sell to them on Amazon or D2C. So what I'd say, if you already have a brand, I would probably put a disproportionate amount of your energies into building your audience through social media, through email lists, through community-driven content. Ideally, you can do this before launching something, but if you've already launched, think about how you're going to do this over the first 6, 12 months, and then, really continue to invest in it over time. The craziest things, Jordan, have happened in this space because of audiences. And I think back to a client of mine in the men's accessory space. They literally sold a suite of products that you would think of as one-time purchases, but because of their community, because of their audiences, they had just crazy high customer LTV and more repeat purchases than you can imagine. I think their average customer bought from them 3 or 4 times. And again, it's a durable product. It's sort of a product that you would think is a one and done purchase for most customers. But what they found was that because the people in their community had so much affinity for the brand, they would buy 2 or 3 of the same product, or when a new product was released, they would go and buy it. So I think that's the real value in having an audience. It increases your customer LTV. It lowers your customer acquisition cost. Those are really the 2 things that you need to succeed on Amazon and, frankly, in the broader e-commerce landscape.
Okay. So I was looking for an answer of, some cool trick that you can do for your Amazon product headline, but it sounds like a lot of this stuff you're looking at from a more kind of macro perspective. Is that true?
Yeah, but I'll satisfy.
If you could give us kind of the 80 of like what to focus on the kind of
Yeah,
Amazon listing.
yeah. Let's go macro to micro. I think on an Amazon listing, first of all, going back to what I said before, first party data through brand analytics, search query performance reporting is probably the most rich form of reporting within the brand analytics suite. But if you're looking to kind of hack your growth on Amazon, first and foremost, understand at the keyword level where you are seeing leakage from your funnel or where your funnel isn't strong enough on the top end. And what I see most often is brands don't have a traffic problem. They either have a click-through problem or conversion problem. Traffic isn't easy to obtain on Amazon, but it can quickly swell, especially when you invest in PPC, especially when you bring off Amazon traffic, especially when you have an audience coming there. But where you lose is your click-through rate is below your competitors, and so you're sending negative signals to the algorithm day in and day out, or your conversion rate is below your competitors, below kind of the median in the category. So again, you're sending.
Just on that point, so do you have the data to see like what your click-through rate is and then what your competitors are?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So, um, well, yeah, yes and no. You need to stitch together some different reports to get there, but you can essentially create those relative comparisons. Within the search query performance data, you can look at your click-through share versus what's going on in the overall market. And so that's one level of benchmarking. To get to specific competitors, you need to pull in some third-party data to do so and a separate set of reports, but it's possible. Again, I say simple but not easy. I think the simple part is stitching together the reports. The not easy part is operationalizing it. But yes, you can understand at the keyword level, at the competitor level, how your click-through rate compares. And on that basis, make adjustments to your listing. And I think, the adjustments that you would make are relatively intuitive to a strong marketer. We've all seen what an Amazon search results page looks like. And there's, a half dozen elements that show up, right? There's the main image, there's the title, there's the price, there's the star rating, there's the number of ratings, there's any sort of badging, there's the delivery speed. There's about 7, sometimes 8 elements that appear. Some of those are controllable, some of those are not. So if you're a brand with a click-through rate problem as diagnosed by first-party data, then one of the first things that I suggest is look at your main image, split test your main image. There's so many ways to enrich a main image, to stop the scroll, to create what I call curated contrast from everyone else and earn that click. And that's where I would advise brands to start first. And you can run a split test through Amazon's Manage Your Experiments feature, or you can run a split test through third-party tools like Product Pinion, PickFu, IntelliV. There's a few others. So main image is a big thing that as an agency, we really focus on either pre-launch or downstream as we're trying to optimize a brand's presence. Outside of that, title used to be a big thing to focus on, both from an SEO and click-through and conversion perspective. Going forward, the challenge here is Amazon is going to start contextualizing titles based on who you are as a shopper. So Jordan, you and I could look at the exact same product and we will see different titles. It's wild. And this Amazon announced this back in September at their Accelerate conference, and it's slowly starting to propagate across marketplaces and across the catalog. But this goes back to kind of what I was talking about before, building an audience first, understanding where your audience is, meeting them where they are. Amazon's trying to do the exact same thing. They know that you are more likely, based on your shopping behavior, to convert or click on a title that is written as this version, and that I am more likely to click and convert on a title that's written a little differently. So I say this because title used to be a big thing that you might want to play with and split test if you're having a click-through or even a conversion problem. It's harder to do that now because you have less control. But nevertheless, it's a lever. The last lever that I'd focus on for click-through is price. And it's maybe not the last one in terms of power and impact on click-through. And in fact, I think price is the biggest lever you can pull. Changing price drastically comes at the expense of margin. And so I often, you can change your main image, you can change your title at basically zero cost and see the impact. Price has a real financial cost on your business if that was the issue that was causing your click-through to be so poor relative to competitors, relative to the market. And then, go to your detail page and you can kind of do the same exercise for conversion. On your detail page, you have your image stack, and there's a lot of optimization and split testing that you can do around that. There's the storytelling in your bullets and your product description. And then there's your A+ content or your premium A+ content. which again is about storytelling and really hitting on the features, product benefits, and unique selling points that matter to customers. That's probably the short version of it. I mean, the reality is there are people like me and as an agency owner who we have businesses because this is not easy, or to the extent it's easy, it's very difficult to execute. So the point is the data is there, and what you do with the data is really kind of what unlocks the next step of growth, next stage of growth.
I want to touch now on a challenge. So I'm not an Amazon expert, but I constantly see on Twitter and friends of mine that are kind of in the Amazon space. Seems like a lot of issues with kind of Chinese sellers and the problems that they bring, whether it's kind of competition or kind of other things. Can you just talk a little bit about that kind of problem and what you guys do as an agency for your brands to kind of mitigate any issues there?
Yeah, Chinese sellers and copycats has been an acute and persistent issue on Amazon, really dating back to 2018, coinciding with my time there when Amazon really opened its doors and embraced Chinese manufacturers and encouraged them to sell on the marketplace direct to consumers. And there are some great brands that have spawned from that. Anchor is a tremendous brand and a brand I respect and admire that started in as an Amazon first brand, I want to say in 2013, and grew to a multi-billion-dollar company that now trades publicly on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. They were one of the biggest brands in my category, and I think they truly epitomize what it means to grow a brand on Amazon and do it the right way, as a lot of their brethren were doing or resorting to black hat and gray hat tactics. Anchor was doing the right things, building high quality products and putting those products in front of their customers in whatever place or state of mind their customers were. But there's a long tail of I don't want to, you know, cast a single country with, a broad brush, because there's a long list of origins of black hat sellers. But the more unsavory competitors on the marketplace, I think one of the biggest things you can do to protect yourself is to enroll in Amazon's brand registry program and make use of the tools available there. Now, myself and many people will rightly criticize that Amazon doesn't always act on authentic reporting from the brands whose rights are supposedly being protected by brand registry. But I always look at it from the perspective of, if you're not enrolled, then you don't have the ability to wield these tools. Even if the hit rate on these tools is 10%, that's 10% more issues that you're going to have to deal with. So brand registry is kind of table stakes for a lot of brands, particularly in the consumables space. I often encourage transparency, which is Amazon's barcoding program. There are trade-offs with enrolling in it, but if you have a real leaky distribution channel or distribution network, or if you truly have problems with counterfeiters and copycats, the best way to cut all the heads off that snake is through transparency. So there's a long list of brand protection tools in our kit that we wield as an agency. And frankly, a lot of the brands that we work with, because they're omni-channel, they come to us with half a dozen resellers on their listings on Amazon, and they need us to help cleaning it out. So we often kind of start there before we scale their brand presence on Amazon, because we don't want our ad dollars benefiting the resellers. We don't want our investments in brand equity and brand awareness to benefit the resellers. Amazon is a marketplace, and these competitive issues are part and parcel to that. But I guess if I had to kind of put a bow on this, what I'd say is Amazon's tools do work, not 100% of the time, and the right tool varies based on the right set of circumstances, and the right partners might be important in different sets of circumstances, whether they're law firms or agencies like us that can help police a brand. The only other thing I'll say that can be a nice source of a competitive moat, particularly if you're a brand and you're the manufacturer, is Amazon-specific SKUs, right? So something that you're not offering on your retail channels, on your D2C channels, that's a good way of kind of insulating yourself against distribution leakages or even copycats to some extent. And then the other thing is, if you're not the brand or manufacturer, but you're sourcing a product, create a complex supply chain, right? Make your product difficult to replicate. If you sell a kit on Amazon. Source your supplies from your kits components from multiple different suppliers, and then have a final assembly set, or maybe have one of those last remaining suppliers assemble it. But complex supply chains can be a source of moat, at least in the short or medium term. And even in the long term, if your supply chain is so complicated that it kind of makes every brand scratch their head and wonder how you've made the unit economics work. So that's something that requires a little planning, of course. But if you're a brand that's struggling with counterfeit issues, with reseller issues, brand registry, transparency, those are kind of the things you want to at least come to the table with.
Interesting. I now want to kind of fast forward. So we've kind of talked about launching, scaling, protection, all these kind of topics. I want to talk about exiting. So I know there's
Mm,
kind of been a lot of ups and downs, shall we say, in the kind of Amazon exit space. Can you just kind of touch on where you think kind of the market is now in terms of activity and multiples and things like that?
yeah. So I guess I'm uniquely positioned to answer this because, as I kind of touched on it, I've acquired brands. I'm acquiring agencies right now. I sit on both sides as a buyer and a seller, and frankly, as a broker and M&A advisor. One of the other hats I wear is I operate as deal director for a firm called Ecom Brokers. So I see deal flow from both sides. I help brands exit. I'd say, putting on my buyer hat and knowing firsthand how hard Amazon is as an operator in terms of platform risk, in terms of competition, and knowing how hard retail is in general from a cash flow perspective, I'd say that, you know, 2 to 3x earnings, it feels like the natural trading range for Amazon assets, Amazon brand assets. It sort of feels like the natural trading range for e-commerce or D2C brands in general. The reality is, a lot of these brands that you might acquire, you are acquiring a job, and you're going to have to put a lot of cash flow, a lot of cash in them to help them scale. You know, in the Amazon aggregator heyday a couple of years ago, I think the natural trading range was 3.5 to 5x. And I certainly saw, heard, or was a party to exits that were 6x, 7x, 8x. I think those days are gone. I don't think they're coming back. I think it's possible the Amazon aggregator wave comes back, but I don't think that Amazon brand assets are going to trade at that range. I think, again, the natural range is 2 to 3x. Frankly, as a buyer of Amazon brands today, well, number one, I'm not actively looking for brands, but if I were, my top end multiple is probably 1.5x EBITDA or 1.5x STE. Because the reality is, I'm going to have to write a big check for inventory, either to the brand to buy what they have on hand or to their supplier. And I need to sustain this business for at least a year and a half to make my money back, or grow it very quickly in 6, 12 months to make my money back early. And doing that in the face of an evolving market, a competitive market, an Amazon platform that is increasingly inhospitable is very tough. So I think that's kind of where I would put the market. And I think the market multiples will remain depressed for another 2 years. It really just depends on the macro environment, the interest rate environment, because that's another factor at play here. When interest rates are 5, 6, 7%, it becomes harder to finance these acquisitions through debt or pay a 4x multiple on debt because you can't service the debt at that rate.
Okay. Final kind of Amazon question then before we start to round things off. What would you say to kind of, a business that's looking to enter the space in 2025? First part is, is it still worth starting an Amazon only business at kind of this time? And then what should they be doing to prepare for changes in, AI, consumer behavior, competition, and so on over the next kind
Yeah,
of few years?
I touched on this already, but it's worth repeating, and that is building an audience first. I think, and look, you don't have to build an audience yourself. You can borrow an audience. I am a big proponent of buying and then building, right? The reason I'm so passionate about M&A is it helps me skip the line. I've done 0 to 1 before. It is hard. I don't enjoy it. I like going from 1 to N. I think the beauty of that is you're stepping into something that has product market fit. And if your filters are well tuned, you are stepping into a business where your individual abilities, or the collective abilities of yourself, your partners, what you bring to the table, can accelerate that business from 1 to N faster. And so I say that because it's possible to buy an audience. Social media assets are tradable assets. I talked about this on stage at the event that I was just at. Or alternatively, There's a long list of creators out there who know zero about building product businesses, zero about building brands, product brands, but they know a lot about building audiences. They know a lot about building personal brands. And I think that there's magic that can happen for people looking to start in the e-commerce space in 2025 or on Amazon by just saying, "Hey, Jordan, I love your fitness content on Instagram. Have you ever thought about starting a supplement brand? Or have you ever thought about starting an exercise products brand?" And, reach out to 50 people like that. Invariably, you're going to get one that says, "Yeah, actually, but I don't know where to start." And hopefully that one has an audience of 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers. And now you've just sort of shortcutted your path to launching on Amazon, right? Because what can you do with that creator partner? That person can start to build some momentum, build some hype around your soon to be launched products, and then as they launch, all that owned traffic can get pulled over to Amazon or your D2C store. So I truly believe building an audience first, or renting an audience, borrowing an audience, is a serious way to grow a business in Amazon or off Amazon, and a strong way to build a business when you don't have kind of the structural advantages that some of the Chinese manufacturers have in terms of costing. You don't have the ethical advantages that black hats have in terms of skirting rules and bending rules. If you want to build a legitimate brand with true exit value, build an audience first, borrow an audience first, and then launch to that audience. Speak to that audience and only that audience, and what you'll find is that attracts people in.
Okay. And what would you say to the first part of the question? Should businesses start, an Amazon only brand in 2025?
Yes, but the big asterisk I'd put against that is they shouldn't do it alone. Amazon is a very, very difficult channel. The three immutable Amazon laws that I always share, and I'm going to repeat here, is with each passing year, Amazon gets costlier. With each passing year, Amazon gets more complex. And Amazon is always the best and worst partner you will ever have. And so because of that, you need people, you need a fractional CFO. You need a team that not only is ahead of the curve when it comes to advanced Amazon strategies, but can help you execute on them. Much like I'm passionate about buying and building, I also believe strongly in hiring to fill in my gaps and fill in the competency areas or the areas where I just don't have time to put my thumb to the scale. So I think that's the big piece of advice that I would give to brands, starting in 2025 or thinking about Amazon only in 2025.
Sorry, we glitched. I'll have to
Yeah,
cut
we
that bit
froze
out.
a little there.
So yeah, I think, look, coming on to kind of the last question then about, your work in the M&A space, are you just focused on the agency side here? And then I guess the kind of follow up to that is, why agencies? Like, why are you so kind of passionately interested in that space, given your experience across brands and, other pieces of the business world as well?
Yeah. So the short answer to the first part of your question is yes, just focused on agencies, focused really on boutique service providers in the e-commerce realm. My partner and I started in Amazon because that's what we know. We know how to run an Amazon agency. We know how to scale brands on Amazon. Where we have gaps is TikTok Shop, Walmart, SEO, whether that's Google or Bing or YouTube. Uh, we have a long list of gaps, and rather than start at zero and grow to one, I'd rather find a partner, a like-minded partner who has built a business in that domain that we can step into and join forces with. Now, the bigger vision behind this is, well, it's sort of rooted in that old, I think it's an African proverb, and it's along the lines of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that logic applies in business and in the M&A space. It's very hard to grow an agency focused on a single discipline or a single channel to a certain size, right? If we want to get to 10 million in EBITDA, that is hard. It is going to be a grind. I'm not going to say it's not possible, because there are some agencies out there that in the Amazon space that have achieved that kind of escape velocity, but it takes a long time. What I'd rather do is continue along my Amazon agency directory, but bolt on a Walmart agency, bolt on a Shopify agency, bolt on a retail media agency, and collectively, let's get to 10 million together, because at that level of EBITDA, it attracts higher multiples, it attracts different buyers. A lot of magic happens when you get to certain levels, certain sizes, basically. So that's kind of what we're doing. In terms of the why behind it, I mean, I touched on kind of the exit aspirations, but what I'd say also is I kind of come from the consulting world. That was really where I first cut my teeth in professional life, consulting. So in some ways, services businesses, consulting businesses, human capital businesses are really what I know best. Almost the only thing that I know. Feel very good about my ability to grow an agency, regardless of the channel focus or the domain focus, because I understand how systems drive results, how important it is to hire the right people, and how to put systems in place to hire those people and remove yourself from the hiring process. So it's just a domain where I feel kind of really good about my ability to put my thumb to the scale, and where I feel I have a differential advantage. The other piece to it is, you know, there's a lot of conversation and talk and speculation around disruption due to AI. And I think there's a reasonable line of argumentation that says services businesses will be made obsolete by AI operators, by agentic AI. I don't subscribe to that notion. And I don't subscribe to that notion for a simple reason rooted in a very basic human truth. And that truth is, we will always hire people to do something that we can't, or endure a pain that we don't want to endure, right? And so, like, on the do something we can't piece, yes, in theory, AI operator, an agentic AI solution could do that, but you need to know how to harness that. So there's still a competency gap that I think will exist. And then on the pain side, look, I said it at the top of this podcast, my agency runs my brands now. There is so much about running an Amazon brand that is mind-numbing, that is frustrating, that is sort of want to bang my head against the desk on. And I will happily pay someone to endure that so that I don't have to, so that I can focus on my superpowers, my unique strengths, my zones of genius and zones of passion. I don't think AI takes that away. I think the human condition is to serve others. And so I'm sort of making a bet on that by rolling up agencies.
Okay, makes sense. John, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Two kind of quick fire questions now to round things off. The first is, if people are interested in following you and kind of hearing more about your story, where is the best place to do that?
Yeah, so I would say most of my long form content appears in my Best at Amazon newsletter. It's a newsletter for the top 1% of Amazon sellers and brands. I'll send you the link, Jordan, and you can put it in the show notes. The other place that I'm very active, and it's more short form, is LinkedIn, just at John Derkits, Jon. And then, for anyone that wants to reach out and have some one-on-one conversations, John, Jon, at colormorelines.com is my agency email.
And I think you also do some consulting, right? I think a mutual connection recently mentioned that you took a phone call with them and really helped them out.
Yeah, that's right. I don't do as much as I used to, but I do one-on-one coaching, consulting, whatever word you want to apply to it. It's really kind of executive level and strategy focused for Amazon. Of course, a lot of it comes from my time as a brand operator, my time at Amazon, my time as an agency owner. Basically, people get me as a fractional executive on their team, essentially a board advisor for however long they want me.
Perfect. Well, John, thank you so much again for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, of course, Jordan. I hope we get to meet in person soon.
For sure. Yeah, that'd be good, hey? Hopefully
Yeah.
at an event.
Yeah. I think I'll be in London in May, so hopefully we can catch up there.
Perfect. Scaling an e-com brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.